And welcome into Gator Bytes on the 1010XL.com podcast network. Also being simulcast on the Florida Gator 1010XL Facebook page. Today's Gator podcast is brought to you by Southeast Orthopedic Specialists. They're Northeast Florida's leading orthopedic center, providing an unparalleled level of care across numerous locations in both Jacksonville and St. Augustine. That includes Riverside, Northside, the South Side, the beaches, Fleming Island, and St. John's. He is Graham Marsh. I'm the hacker, Ryan Green. You, presumably, are Florida Gator fans. You're 1-2, heading to Starkville for a big noon Eastern battle tomorrow with a team that actually might be worse than the Florida Gators and the Mississippi State Bulldogs. Graham, you've had a week to digest Texas A&M. It was not any prettier than Miami. In fact, there were some instances where it was probably worse. And the question isn't about Mississippi State now. The question is, when will the Gators be looking for a new head coach?
That is the question. I will address that here momentarily, but I have to say something. I have to address. I am a man that admits when he is wrong. I am. You and I, a week ago, we sat here and we argued about DJ Lagway versus Graham Mertz. I'm not really counting the end of the game because the game was over anyway. It's garbage time, whatever. But in the time that perhaps Florida had some type of sliver of prayer to maybe come back and win, Mertz objectively looked better. Yeah, if they had kept Mertz in the whole game, I don't think they would have won because they still looked so bad everywhere else, particularly on defense. I mean, I'm not sure Tom Brady would have come in there and won that game with the way that defense looked. But to your credit, you were kind of on an island last week saying that Mertz would give you the better option to beat A&M. If they had played Mertz start to finish, it would have given them a better chance than if they had put Lagway in for the duration of the game, most likely. What I do know, and to get back to the coaching point, what the hell was that? Alternating drives like that.
Yeah.
That was so stupid.
You didn't stick with the hot hand. And I got the Lagway excitement last week, and we talked about that on this podcast. People wanted to grasp at hope for DJ Lagway. People were very excited about DJ Lagway, and I totally get that. He played Samford, all right? He looked like he looked against Samford. There is a reason that Samford is Samford, and when he played an SEC defense, the caliber of A&M, you saw what a true freshman quarterback looks like. So hope that didn't damper the spirits, but, yeah, I mean, thank you for mentioning that, and I'll pat myself on the back because I didn't think Mertz was very good either, mind you, but he was clearly the better of the two. Having said that, that's now 2 games at home that Billy Napier knew he had to win, and 2 games at home where Florida has looked awful. And all week, are they going to fire Billy on Sunday? If they lose to Mississippi State, is he going to be fired going into the bye week? You got all these guys now missing tomorrow's game, including Eugene Wilson on the injury report. This is a disaster. I think this is something we probably all feared the entire offseason. And it's like we're living our worst nightmare.
Yeah.
They're going to win like 3 or 4 games this year.
If we were able to jump in a time machine and go back to like July, having a Gator Bytes episode, and we were to bring up the topic, okay, what's the worst case scenario for the Gators? We're watching this in real time.
Outside of losing to Samford, but yes.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, true. But I mean, dude, so here, but worst case scenario in general terms of, I'm not sure that at this point, and I'm not going to do it because I physically can't. Like when my eyes watch the Florida Gators play football, like my brain has to root for them to do well on the field. It's just programmed already in there by now. I'm not getting rid of that. But it's probably at the point now where them doing worse to expedite the process of firing Billy Napier and moving on is probably better now long term, right?
Yeah, but here's the thing with that. We know he's going to be fired.
Yeah.
He knows he's going to be fired.
The players
know he's going to be fired, which makes for a really interesting dynamic. Everybody watching us knows he's going to be fired. And look, I feel bad for Billy. There was a picture circulating with Billy and his wife, I guess, consoling each other after the A&M game. And you kind of feel bad for the family. They are going to get $26 million when he gets fired. They're going to be just fine. But the problem now, Graham, is that if you're a player,
yeah,
Is what Billy's saying resonating with you at all? Because literally any day or maybe even any hour, if they lose to Mississippi State, he's going to be shown the door. I don't know what you gain by firing him 4 games in. Would you just promote Dan Enos at that point, who's the only other guy with head coaching experience? Whether you fire him 4 games in or 8 games in, you know he's going to be gone. I just don't know what you gain by doing it this early.
Yeah, so Dylan and I talked about this on our podcast the other day, and I was kind of saying the same thing. I would fire him now, personally. If this was my decision to make, he would not be Florida's coach right now. For a couple of reasons that we can get into in a second. But to your point, I agree with you that and it's kind of a gray area who's actually making this decision right now. We've heard it'll be Strickland again. We've heard it'll be the boosters.
It's going to be the boosters.
Yeah. So I tend to think so as well.
I've heard that from too many people in Gainesville that this is not going to be Strickland's decision, and more importantly, it's not going to be Strickland's decision who they hire.
Right. So okay. If the boosters don't see any direct benefit to firing him today, tomorrow, Sunday after Mississippi State, what have you, versus firing him in November, they owe Billy Napier 50% of what is remaining on his contract up front within 30 days of terminating him. So if they keep him around for a couple of months and let that number dwindle down a bit as they pay him throughout the season, that makes that number a little bit more tolerable. It's not a ton, but it's a little bit more tolerable. Either way, you're going to have to swallow a big portion of money to pay somebody not to coach.
Mm-hmm.
So do you do that now, or do you make him do his job for a few more months, make that 50% number a little bit lower that they have to cough up right away, and do it that way? Because unfortunately, and this is what I was saying with Dylan the other day,
on the award-winning Denmark and Marsh podcast.
Correct.
Yes.
Unfortunately, Hack, I wish it could, but firing him today does not allow us to fast forward to November.
No.
You know what I mean? And I think
this is going to be death by 1,000 cuts.
Right. And
it's going to be brutal.
And we all know that obviously we all understand obviously that firing Billy today doesn't mean you're going to hire the new guy next week or whatever, right? Any eligible candidate that would be attractive to you is in the middle of coaching a season. And we're really, really, really early to be talking about this.
And you're going to make 2 calls. You're going to call Lane Kiffin. If he says no, you're going to call Eli Drinkowitz. That's what I think you're going to do.
Eli Drinkowitz, okay.
Yeah. That's what I would do. That's what I've heard through the grapevine. I mean, Jed Fish, I know there's ties there, but I don't know. I think it's Lane Kiffin, and if he tells you no, it's Eli Drinkowitz. That's just me. Does that come as a surprise to you?
The Eli, yeah. I
like Drinkowitz a lot.
I don't. Not that I think he's not a good coach. I just don't like him as a guy. That said, if he was coaching my program, I'd probably love him as a guy.
Yeah. and yeah, well, you know what I've heard about Drinkowitz? I've heard, well, he doesn't fit Gainesville. He doesn't fit, this part of the country. Well, you know who fits this part of the country like a glove? Is Billy Napier.
Yeah.
And that didn't work.
Right.
So maybe they need a little change if Lane Kiffin says no.
I mean, Urban Meyer wasn't some Southern guy.
No, of course not.
Urban Meyer is Midwest guy, and he had been coaching out west.
Yeah. You know who else fits this part of the country like a glove? Will Muschamp.
Right.
That didn't work either.
Right.
So I would think outside the box a little bit. Yeah. But anyway, get back to your point.
Yeah, no, but I personally think Drinkowitz actually is I do not like him right now. I'm not a fan of Eli Drinkowitz. I don't like how he is on the side. He just bothers me for a lot of reasons. That's a conversation for a different day.
Let him get Florida in the top 10. Then we'll see.
That's a good point.
Yeah,
we'll
see if you like him.
Well, and that's kind of what I wanted to say to kind of lead into my next point. Where I think he would fit Florida is what I just said. Those are the most successful Florida coaches, are they not? The guys that you can't stand them when they're on your opposing sideline, but when they're on your sideline, you love them. Spurrier, Meyer. Every non-Gator fan hated those 2 guys' guts, but every Florida fan would ride or die for that guy, right?
Yeah.
Spurrier was cocky. He was brash. He would say anything. Urban not as much with the media, but he was still that cocky. You could tell just in his persona when he was in Gainesville, he's like, I know I'm going to beat the ever-loving bleep out of the team across from me. Eli kind of has that sort of vibe to him, right? Doesn't he kind of feel that way? Lane 100% feels that way. Dan kind of felt that way for a while here in game. I know things fell off the end, and that's a different conversation, but
we'd welcome him back now with open arms.
I don't know if he would be able to build this roster back to what it needs to be, but in terms of a Saturday coach, hell yeah. All that said, I need a cocky son of a gun back on the sideline. Agree or disagree?
Yeah.
You
need to bring a little swagger back.
And that doesn't mean that obviously doesn't mean that's the only qualifier. Obviously, you need more than that. But I need somebody that shows up and says, my program is going to beat your program's ass Saturday in, Saturday out, because I'm a great coach and I'm at a great program, and that's it.
Something that's come to fruition, at least since the A&M game, that I've noticed, I want to get to in a moment because I think it's a pretty big deal. Today's Gator Bytes podcast is brought to you by Southeast Orthopedic Specialists. For the highest quality care, you can rely on Southeast Orthopedic Specialists for any orthopedic injury or concern. You can log on to their website by going to se-ortho.com, and you can listen for Southeast Orthopedic Specialists, the good doctor, Kevin Murphy, on Thursday mornings in the 7 o'clock hour with Jeff and Dan right here on 1010XL for his weekly analysis of injuries in sports. We sat here a couple of weeks ago. Coaches on the hot seat can survive fan anger. They can survive fan frustration. What they can't survive is apathy. There was a time for a majority of my life that the 12 times Florida played football in the regular season were just enormous for my buddies, for my family, people that I knew. Florida plays a football game, one of 12, tomorrow at high noon against Mississippi State. I know guys that don't care. That don't care.
Yeah.
That Florida is playing a football game on the road, their first conference road game tomorrow against Mississippi State. One of my buddies, who's a alum season ticket holder, is playing golf at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. He doesn't care. That's apathy.
Yes.
And that's how you know it's over for Billy Napier.
It is. It's also, so that's how you know it's over. There's another way you know it's over as well. Twitter, let me break news to everyone who's not aware. Twitter is not real life, right?
Although we sometimes think it is in our little world, but it's not.
It can feel like it is, though, when you're in the Twitter storm, right? I believe Twitter and social media in general has played a big part in the narrative that Florida has this incredibly toxic fan base. I'm not saying the fan base is perfect. I'm not saying everything is reasonable. I'm not saying all their expectations are great. But here's what I'm getting at. There's this idea that the fan base jumped ship on Billy really early in his tenure. That's not true. There were certain people on Twitter calling for his head, but you're always going to have those, right? But what has just now started happening, fire Napier chants in the swamp, empty seats at halftime, back to your apathy point. Stuff like the Boo Birds. Those things don't happen until it's really, really, truly over. That didn't happen in the Muschamp era until the bitter, bitter end, right? I don't think that ever happened in the McElwain or Mullen eras.
What's going to be pathetic is if they lose to Mississippi State, how many UCF fans will be in Gainesville?
I know the whole stadium is going to be black and gold.
Now, here's the thing with Florida fans. Florida fans don't make the ultimate decision about firing coaches. Obviously, that's the ADs and the presidents. But the boosters and fan distaste over the years, I mean, let's be honest. Spurrier left in 2002. Zook, Meyer, Muschamp, McElwain, Mullen, Billy. You're about to have your 7th coach in 23 years. You're averaging less than 3.5 years per coach. I'm not saying Florida's got a necessarily toxic fan base. I think Florida's fan base is very similar to numerous other SEC programs. They have very high expectations, although at Florida it's probably not warranted. Fans need to be a little more realistic. But if you're Lane Kiffin or Eli Drinkowitz or whomever, does it give you pause when the Gators call that you're about to be their 7th coach in the last 2.5 decades?
No.
I think it does. I think it does. Lane Kiffin could walk on water at Ole Miss. If Lane Kiffin comes to Florida and has a bad year and a half, he's going to be in trouble, just like McElwain, Muschamp, Zook, Billy, and that's Florida fans being a little unrealistic about where they are in the pecking order. Reality is reality, Florida fans. You don't want to hear this, and I really don't want to tell you this, but it is reality. Of the 16 SEC teams right now, Florida is 14th, maybe 15th. They are awful right now. That is where your football program is. You're not in the top 5 of the conference. You're not in the top 10. You're not in the top half. You are in the bottom 3 or 4 with Vanderbilt and with Mississippi State. That is where you are right now.
That's where you are as a team, but that's not where the program is like tiered. In the
last what, 4 years? Yeah, it is.
In terms of how they've performed on the field, yes, I understand.
That's a pretty big sample size.
I understand that, but I'm saying no one believes Vanderbilt and Florida are the same job in terms of attractiveness.
No, I'm not saying same job. But right now, if Vanderbilt plays Florida tomorrow, who are you picking to win?
I understand. I understand the team on the field. I understand that, but I'm saying in terms of hiring a new coach.
Okay, so are you one of those people that thinks Florida is a better job than Ole Miss?
Yes.
Why?
Because Florida has won national championships in the time that most of us have been alive. Ole Miss is not.
Okay, so that's the criteria. If you won a national championship, you're a better job than somebody who hasn't won a national championship?
In the time that most people that watch football every Saturday have been alive, yeah. If you want them in 1950, I'm not counting that. But, I mean, Florida's won a national championship this millennium. That they've shown that their ceiling is high enough to do that.
So Florida and Georgia Tech then are the same caliber job because Georgia Tech's won a title.
This millennium?
1990.
No, there's obviously more. That's one part of the criteria.
Here's why I disagree with you, and this is going to be an interesting topic because Lane Kiffin's going to be the first phone call. In the land of NIL and transfer portal, I think it's really narrowed these jobs. Ole Miss has a ton of money. This is not 1995 anymore.
And they've got their NIL straightened out.
When you have facilities, you have NIL, you got big money boosters, you got a full stadium. To say that Florida is a better job than Ole Miss right now is, again, I think Gator fans reliving the glory years of the mid-'90s and early 2000s and not focusing on where we are now in 2024. Is it a better job than Vanderbilt? Yes. Is it a better job than Mississippi State? Yes. I don't know if Florida's a better job than Ole Miss because Ole Miss has a lot of money over there and a lot of things going for it right now.
I believe that Florida, if they got into a bidding war with Ole Miss, could win that bidding war.
Paying Napier $26 million to walk away.
I understand. I still believe Florida could do it.
Yeah.
Overall, Florida has more resources, has more money than Ole Miss does.
Well, look,
and that's part of being a better job. And if all was right with the world, if they were doing everything correctly, they would have better resources. I know they don't right now because you're right. With NIL and the way things have changed and the transfer portal, there's a much more direct line and direct path to getting players that Ole Miss has nailed, and they've done it correctly. A big reason they've done it correctly is they've got the coach pushing the controls correctly.
Sure.
So that's part of it. And look, it's kind of hard to say this right now because you're right. They have been so terrible on the field.
The last 4 years have been ineptitude.
Correct. I still believe that they are the correct hire away from this conversation being in a different stratosphere 2-3 years down the road.
Did you say that when they fired Urban Meyer, or when Urban Meyer left and they brought in Muschamp?
Yes, sure.
Did you say that when Muschamp left and they brought in McElwain?
Sure.
When McElwain left and they brought in Mullen? When Mullen left, they brought in. At what point are we going to stop saying they're one hire away?
When they hire the right guy.
Right, that's my point. They've hired. This is going to be their 7th coach.
Right.
In 23 years.
Florida has not had a firing problem. They have had a hiring problem. They are hiring the wrong guys. Are they not?
I mean,
Will Muschamp is not coaching anywhere right now.
Hey, hold on.
As a head coach.
For starters, that when they hired him, Will Muschamp was the coach in waiting at Texas and had already turned down Tennessee.
I get it.
Billy Napier turned down Auburn. All right? Mullen, obviously, was a big deal, was already an SEC coach. It's easy in hindsight to say they're hiring the wrong guys. When the hires were made, they were not the wrong guys. Florida fan, you were pumped about Billy Napier, and you know you were. I had people telling me Billy Napier over Brian Kelly. He's young. He's going to kill it on the recruiting trail. You were pumped when they hired Will Muschamp. The only one you could say you weren't necessarily pumped about was Jim McElwain, yet I remember a world where people saw a McElwain clip of him talking to his Colorado State team and were using comparisons to what Bobby Bowden used to talk about to his Florida State team. You get ultra positive on these guys, and a year and a half or 2 years in, when things aren't working out, you get firewhatevercoach.com. And that's happened time and time and time again in Gainesville.
But is that the fans' fault? It's not the fans' fault. The fans are, no matter who they hire, heck, Florida could hire you tomorrow, and the fans are going to drink the Kool-Aid and convince themselves that you're the best hire for the job.
I'm just saying,
because
Steve,
we're fans.
Everybody wants the next Spurrier, and everybody wants the next Meyer. And in the history of Florida football, which is a long history, 100+ years of Gator football, those are the two guys. Two guys out of a century plus of Gator football. I don't know if you're ever going to get another Spurrier or a Meyer. Now, you need to do better than what you're doing, but the culture at Florida, you talk about something being toxic. Let's talk about the program. Let's talk about how long it took to do facilities. Let's talk about the stadium being where it is in the pecking order of SEC stadiums. Have you been to some of these SEC stadiums and compared it to the Swamp? The Swamp is not good when it comes to a lot of these areas. Florida football has fallen behind a ton of SEC programs in a lot of different departments.
I agree. We agree on a lot of the things we're saying. My problem is I feel like you're making it sound like these things are the fans' fault.
They're not the fans' fault, but what I'm saying is the fans stir the pot a little bit on platforms like social media.
Of course they do.
And look, if you want to know where Florida is right now, again, 7 coaches in 23 years. How many other Power 5 programs can say that have won your national title argument? All right, how many national championship programs in the last 3 decades are about to have their 7th head coach in 23 years?
I understand that, but it's because they're hiring the wrong guys. And just because the fan base was excited when the time the hire was made doesn't make it the fans' fault that they hired the wrong guy.
No, but
and also, each of these hires, in the moment they made the hire, were in theory smart hires. I agree with you. But that doesn't change the fact that 2-3 years down the road, they got it wrong.
Yeah.
And look, this is the other thing. Zook was 20 years ago, so I'm not really thinking about him right now. I'm talking about like post-Meyer, okay? Muschamp is a defensive coordinator again. He's not head coaching anywhere for a reason. He went to a different SEC program after Florida and still failed. Jim McElwain is in the MAC right now. Will Muschamp is on TV, Dan Mullen is on TV. Billy Napier is probably going to go back to a G5. Like, these guys aren't getting hired elsewhere for a reason. It's because they're not good head coaches at this level. It's because Florida has hired the wrong guys. Most of these guys, I would say all of these guys, it was justified when they were fired. So that's what I'm saying. Like, yes, this is a problem. Yes, this is a cycle. This is frustrating that 2.5 years after firing Mullen, we're having the same conversation. But you got to do it until you get the right guy.
I get you got to do it till you get the right guy. I just think, what's the common denominator among all these coaches is the expectations at Florida. Now, granted, the expectations should be higher than what Billy Napier has provided. I told you, I think they fired Muschamp too early, and I think maybe they fired Mullen too early. And that's kind of my point. Mullen had one bad year. Now, he had a really bad year. The other 3 years were 10-win seasons. Muschamp went 12-1, or I guess 11-2 in his second year, and then he had a couple of down years. But the amazing thing is a down Muschamp year or a down Mullen year would look great right now because I'm telling you, this Gator team is going to go 3-9, or they're going to go 4-8. They're not sniffing a bowl game this year. And then if you're Lane Kiffin and you lead Ole Miss to the playoff, are you going to leave a team you just led to the playoff to come take over a 4-8 program because it's a quote-unquote better job? I highly, highly doubt that. I think Florida might be in for a rude awakening, Gator fans, if Lane Kiffin says no, because the common thought is, Lane would come in a heartbeat. I'm not so sure about that.
So here's the thing, that your reasoning is correct, your logic is correct, but the reality is most of the time that guys have a job like Kiffin does at Ole Miss, where they are like worshipped at that place and they can basically walk on water at that place. But it's not a place that you would consider the top tier of college football because like Florida Ole Miss, like let's put that conversation to the side. Ole Miss is not Georgia. They're not LSU. They're not Alabama.
Although, again, things change very quickly. What was Georgia 20 years ago?
Sure. What was Florida 20 years ago?
Very, very good program.
Correct. So that's why I would remain. Ole Miss has never really been in that conversation. Florida has. So that is the main reason I would consider Florida a better job. They're obviously not there right now. I'm aware of that. So we have this conversation a lot of times with, would this coach leave here to go here, whatever, and this type of thing is brought. Well, that guy's worshipped at this program. He can walk on water at this program. Those coaches typically end up leaving those places. No, historically, history shows that they do.
Lincoln Riley left OU to go to USC is a prime example of that.
There are there's a couple like Mike Gundy's of the world that are kind of in their little bubble in their place, and they win 9 games a year and everyone loves them, and that's great. But most of the time, guys that are in that type of situation do leave. So your logic's not flawed. It makes sense. It's like, why would I leave to a place where I might be under the gun in 2-3 years versus right here? Everyone loves me. I could do this forever. Those guys typically do end up taking the bait and going to a different job. I don't know if it's Florida, but I would venture to believe Lane Kiffin will probably not be the coach at Ole Miss regardless in like 5 years. That's just how college football works.
Southeast Orthopedic Specialists brings you Gator Bytes every week here on 1010XL.com and the Florida Gator 1010XL Facebook page. Again, thank you to the good folks at Southeast Orthopedic Specialists for their continued support of the Gator Bytes podcast. We got to go super quick. Florida does play a football game.
I was about to say
in about 24 hours.
I was about to say, what's so sad about all this is we're now the 27th minute into the podcast. We haven't talked about any football.
And that goes back to what I said earlier. My buddy is a diehard, an alum like you, a season ticket holder, a diehard. He doesn't care.
It really, really sucks to be heading into week 4 and the entire conversation is above what's happening on the football field. It's one thing if this is Florida State week and the coach has been fired, you got the interim, whatever, you're looking for the coaching search. That's one thing. Dude, we're in week 4, man. We should be breaking down the offensive line and talking about this receiver matchup versus this DB and yada, yada, yada. But we're not even. That's not the conversation right now.
Having said that, Mississippi State is horrible.
They're horrendous.
Toledo beat them by 21, and it really wasn't even that close.
No.
Mississippi State is worse than Florida.
Yeah.
Florida is a better football team. The question is, if the fans don't care, do the players care, knowing Billy Napier is probably going to be shown the door any day, any week? I guess I'll be interested from that standpoint. On 11 a.m. local kick in Starkville, probably a lot of empty seats in that stadium. It's going to be clunky, man. I don't know. If Florida doesn't... Arguably, tomorrow is their easiest game left.
Yeah. No, I don't even think it's arguable.
Yeah, I mean, it is. Yeah, you're probably right. Just because it's on the road, maybe. But even though it's on the road, it is probably the easiest game left on their schedule. And ladies and gentlemen of the Gator Bytes podcast, and we love you listening and watching us, if your Florida Gators don't win tomorrow in Starkville, I don't know if they're going to win again this year. And I truly mean that. Having said that, I'm going to pick Florida to win, just because I don't know if I'm going to be able to pick them again.
I picked them to win too. I think they win. I think they win in the most hideous college football game all year. I think they win. They win 14-10.
Yeah.
Actually, there's no way that defense holds them to 10 points. Sorry, let me adjust that. They win 21-17.
And unfortunately, ESPN is airing this thing at noon.
This should be on PBS Kids,
after
bro.
Corso does the headgear pick, they're going to go live to Starkville for Florida, Mississippi State. Talk about a buzzkill.
So people that just accidentally forgot to switch over their channel after game day are going to have to be subject to this.
Real quick, if Florida wins, they're 2-2. Does that give you any hope for UCF and Kentucky in the next couple of games?
No. UCF can score, man. They can put up points. They're a respectable, good program right now. Kentucky just took Georgia to the brink. No. And then by the way, the they're going to go die in Knoxville. I mean, Tennessee's going to put 1,000 points on them.
If
DJ Douglas has to play football in Knoxville. You're aware of this, right?
He's the one that blew the coverage last week on the touchdown.
I mean, number 12, no disrespect as a person, but he is the worst DB I've ever seen put on the Gator uniform. And I watched C.J. McWilliams in real time.
Real quick, if Florida loses tomorrow, which is plausible, is Billy fired on Sunday?
I think so. I believe that Dylan thinks he's gone regardless. He thinks even if they win.
I
don't agree
I
with
heard
that.
him say that you can't fire him after a win.
I agree. I don't think they would fire him if they won. If they lose, I think there's no way you can let him come back to the Swamp and coach another football game. If they win, I think if they win, it just becomes week to week.
Yeah.
The next time that they throw up a stinker and they lose and just look horrendous, which is coming, we all know that's coming, will probably be his last, but it doesn't. I'm at the point where it doesn't matter. I mean, look, that schedule is so hard and this team is so bad that no matter what, trust me, they will look bad enough to get him fired at some point. I mean, even if it's not through this first round, they got to go play Tennessee. They got to play Georgia. They got to go to Texas.
Ole Miss.
They got to play Ole Miss. They got to play LSU. I mean, at some point, they're going to lose by enough to where it doesn't really matter necessarily. It's a matter of when, not if. We all know this. If they lose, I think if they lose, he won't survive by Monday at the latest.
He is Graham Marsh. I'm the hacker Ryan Green. We'll be back next week to recap Florida, Mississippi State, and look forward to a bye week, which is what I think we all need after watching the first third of this college football season.
Can we get a bye season?
Yeah, it'd be nice. Thank you for watching and listening to Gator Bytes, 1010XL.com and the Florida Gator 1010XL Facebook page.